All right. It is Thursday, December 18th, which is a big day for Backdrop. Today is the day that we are going to release a preview version of our software for everybody to download and play with. And will give us about a month before we have the first 1.0.0 release. So if anything critical comes up between now and then, we have some time to fix it. But we at least will get it out so that people can start playing with it, hopefully over the holiday break when they have some free time and aren't doing work, and they'll get all excited about it. So, Backdrop CMS, for those of you who don't know, is a content management system specifically geared for small to medium-sized business, nonprofit, educations, anyone that has a budget they need to work with when building and maintaining their website, and people who might potentially be left behind by Drupal's shift from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8 and the increased costs associated with that change. Drupal 8 has a ton of really amazing features that we would like to also include in Backdrop. We're going to do them differently because we have a different audience in mind. We're going to try and do them in a way that requires as little change as possible, which means the architecture will be similar to that of Drupal 7. So hopefully anyone on a Drupal 7 site will be able to move to Backdrop more easily than they would to Drupal 8. Along the way, we're going to be fixing bugs, so anything that's a bug in Drupal 7 or a bug in Drupal 8 or a bug only in Backdrop we'll fix. And hopefully we'll also be able to simplify existing systems. So Drupal 7 is already a little bit on the too complicated side. So where possible, we're going to be ripping things out, simplifying, making implementations more direct, which hopefully will also improve performance, decrease complexity, and make it easier to learn the system. However, we're going to be really careful when we add new features and simplify existing systems. We've got to do it without changing too much of the existing underlying API. So primarily, we will value the ability to get from Drupal 7 to Backdrop easily, and if changing existing systems changes too much, simplifying existing systems changes too much, we're not going to be able to do it all at once. So we want to keep that process of change really straightforward. Our timeline for getting Backdrop done, as I mentioned, today we get a preview version out. The official release comes on January 15th, so January 15th, 2015. We'll have a version of software that you can download, install, and use, knowing that APIs will no longer be changing out from underneath you. So if you are a contributed module author for Drupal 7, now is a good time to start working on getting your modules Backdrop compatible. And depending on the complexity of your module, it could take an hour, it could take 5 minutes, but hopefully, no matter what, it shouldn't take more than a few days. So depending on what you're doing, it should be a fairly easy process to get that module to work on Backdrop. If you are a contributed module author and you start working on it now and you have any feedback for us, we would love to hear that because we do have a little bit of time to make some changes to the APIs if you have run into problems between now and January 15th. Hopefully there won't be any problems. We've done this a couple of times ourselves. We have a general idea of how it's going to go, but it is new software, so feedback is definitely appreciated. After the 1.0.0 release comes out, we're also going to be adding new features on a regular basis. So every quarter, we're hoping to release a new version of Backdrop that'll contain something new. On the roadmap for the 1.1 version, we currently have rich text editing and a couple of other things. We're hoping to be able to get through all of those, but if we can't get them all done, the 1.1 version will ship with whatever's in there. As bugs are discovered, we'll fix them as needed, and we'll come out with point releases, so 1.0. whatever as needed to fix problems along the way. So hopefully we'll get a really stable API, but we'll still be able to add features consistently over time. So you won't be using software that stands still. It'll continually being improved underneath you, but not breaking APIs. So, in terms of our progress, we don't have any major release blockers on any of our most important issues. So we were working on developing a configuration management tool, which we've done. We wanted a layout builder, which we have, and we wanted a listing builder, which is the views module. And all of those things are in core, and there are no release blockers left on any of them. So that's really good. We have follow-up issues for all of them. The follow-up issues for our config management system are for the 2.x version of Backdrop, so they're not necessarily worth discussing now. Our follow-up versions for the blocks and layout system, or follow-up issues, are related to user interface and usability. So those are things that we are going to need design for. We're going to need pictures, and we're going to need to implement those later. But because they're just user interface changes, we should be able to do that at any time. So those are also not release blockers. But we would love feedback. I know we've got someone working on new designs for us. So hopefully we'll be able to get those changes in soon as well. And then same thing with views. We don't have any release blockers for views for generating listings, but we do have some listings in core that we would like to convert. So if we have anyone wanting to work on those conversions between now and January 15th, we do still have time to get some of those in. We've got one in. We've got 2 on the list here. I think there are a total of 4 that people are working on. So if you want to help.
Are we talking about views conversions?
Yeah.
Yeah, so views conversions, they're probably like the most significant major item that is still being like actively developed upon, but is not actually release blocking. If it were really necessary, we could release 1.0.0 without all of the views listings converted from like hard-coded listings into views. It's just that we're trying to do those conversions beforehand. We don't have any real serious blockers there. We converted admin /content/node just this week. So that's probably one of the most complicated listings in core already, and it's converted. The remaining ones, like they're really easy to assemble the views, but some of them are all of the current pull requests are lacking upgrade paths. So when you upgrade from 777, we need to create these views during the update hooks. And that's really the big holdup on those. So I think I think that we'll get them all converted, but we're doing the preview release today, of course, as you mentioned, but only some of the listings are converted now, but they probably will all be converted by the final release.
Okay. Great. We also have a couple of other areas where we're trying to stay up to date with what's going on with Drupal. We have a couple of issues for Drupal 7 that we're trying to make sure that all of the bug fixes and improvements that are in Drupal 7 also get ported to Backdrop. There's a handful of those left, everything from Drupal 7.33. We need to review that list and get those into Backdrop. And then we also have 2 security issues remaining. These are security problems that were fixed in Drupal 7 and also need to be fixed in Backdrop. So we need to figure out what the fix was for Drupal and either apply the same fix to Backdrop or find a different fix that is more in line with our principles but also solves the security problem. And then we also have 1 issue remaining in terms of our Drupal 8 backports. We looked at all of the work that was going on in Drupal 8, decided that was too much to review, and pulled out some subsets of things we thought were super important for Backdrop. The most important one, the one that remains on our list right now, is related to HTML5. And I think we've gotten all of our HTML5 conversions in. There's just one tiny template cleanup task left, which I was working on before this meeting, hopefully trying to get done, but didn't quite get it done. I only gave myself like 10 minutes, so I'll get that wrapped up after this meeting. And then we should be done with our Drupal 8 backport list, which is great. There's a couple of other less important things that we're working on in Backdrop that now we have some time to think about, depending on our number of bugs that we get reported between now and release date. And that could be things like working on updating our style guide. So this is like making our fonts and our colors slightly different so that using Backdrop feels different from using Drupal. I know we have someone who's scheduled to look at that. I don't think they've actually looked at that. If we had someone else that wanted to weigh in on what our style guide should look and feel like, we could definitely use some help in that area. And then we're also cleaning up the theme system a little bit. Big news this week is that we finally killed the process layer in Backdrop. Killing the process layer is something I worked really hard to do in Drupal 8. We did the same thing in Backdrop, only we did it in a very different way. So the process layer was introduced when you needed to change something later than the pre-process layer. So if you have 2 things, for example, that need to change in the pre-process layer, but before the template file. So when you print it in the template file, you just print it. What we did in Backdrop for the most part is take all of that stuff that had to happen late and move it directly into the template file. So we don't call like Drupal get CSS in process and then just print a variable called CSS. In the template file, we print Drupal get CSS. So it just removes a step. It makes it a little less invisible what's actually going on. So when you open a template file, you can see the functions that are getting called right there. And if you wanted to, process those variables ahead of time, you can move them around in your template file. But we got rid of that entire layer, and that gave us a tiny performance improvement for core alone. I think it'll be a slightly larger performance improvement if you had a ton of modules in your site that were using that. We've obviously gotten rid of a bunch of those function calls, which is good. And most importantly, we've removed a bunch of complexity in the theme system, which has been a problem in Drupal 7, and making things more transparent, easier to understand, is going to make them easier for new people to learn. So I think that is a good step in the right direction. There's a bunch of other stuff related to theme system cleanup that has been deprioritized. Most of that, if we don't get it done between now and January 15th, we'll have to wait until Backdrop 2. So we're just going to try and make the process of creating themes as straightforward as possible. We've done a bunch of improvements in our markup. We're trying to do some improvements in our CSS. I think that'll go a long way to making the site a little bit more approachable for front-enders. They won't be so disgusted by what we're doing over here in Backdrop land. But the most important thing is to make sure that it's really easy for people with HTML, CSS, and PHP experience to work with. So I think we're still moving towards that end goal, which is good. Other things that we're working on is some user experience improvements. We've got some human interface guidelines underway, getting started in terms of how people should interact with our software. And we've got some big issues that we really would like to have resolved early in Backdrop, like getting a rich text editor added to core fairly soon. That's an example of something that we've pushed until after the 1.0 release because we think we can do it without changing any APIs. There's a couple of other minor user experience improvement issues in the queue, and if you're interested in what those are, they all start with square bracket UX square bracket. So if you want to search the queue for those issues, you can see what we're working on in terms of user experience improvements. I'll add that link in here too for a search if we after this meeting, so you can reference that in the meeting agenda going forward. And then we've got a couple of things left that are ready for a final review before we release. Having someone look over all of our CSS and make sure that we're adhering to our own coding standards would be super handy. If we don't get that review done, then there might be stuff in there that's a little bit yucky, but it all works, we think, as it is right now, so it's not critical to get that review done. And we did finally get a review of our layout markup, which was super helpful. That's been on this agenda for a couple of weeks. We were able to get a really thorough review and doing a little bit of debating over how to use proper semantic markup. I think we've come to a couple of great conclusions about how to name layout-based classes. So it sounds like we're definitely moving in the right direction in terms of what we need to change on layout markup, and we'll just need a pull request to get those small changes in. So I think that's a huge help, and I'm really looking forward to getting our layouts cleaned up. And then in terms of the things that we're working on that are super important, that's kind of it. There's obviously a ton of issues in the queue, a lot of them of varying different importance. Things that are tagged with bug are probably our highest on our priority list right now. There's a handful of those. We'll try and get those knocked out before the official release. And then obviously if you guys discover new bugs, you can create new issues, search the queue, make sure they're not there already, and let us know so that we can fix them shortly. Other things that we're working on, we've got one major release blocker that is not actually related to the code of Backdrop, and that is getting an update server in some form working. So the plan for before we release 1.0.0 is to create an update server that when contacted returns information that says there's no updates available. And I think that will unblock us in terms of being able to release the software because we won't have anything that's broken related to the process of checking updates. But obviously that's not what we want long term. We actually want to be able to check the software and make sure that it's up to date and return useful information. So after we get the software out, we'll then start building that. We'll say, okay, well now that the software's not broken, let's build a system that can actually check updates. And we have a plan for how we're going to update core, or how we're going to check the status of core, which is good. We'll do it very similar to how Drupal handles that now. But we are going to need to think about how we're going to handle contrib That will also involve creating a packaging script, because GitHub right now doesn't have a way to do that for us. So there's a little bit more work involved in making sure that your contrib modules are up to date. But I think step one, get the update server returning something so it's not broken. Step two, get the update server actually checking the status of core. And then step three will be getting the update server checking the status of contrib. And I think that kind of fits with the order in which people are going to be doing things anyway. People are going to install Backdrop so that they can get it running, so that they can port their modules. So I think that getting the not errors happening when you're checking Backdrop is super important, and then actual update information for Backdrop followed by update information for contrib. So that's pretty exciting. I think very straightforward in terms of our path forward. We just need to have people start working on it. So if anyone wants to work on building an update server, it's a little bit outside of the skill set of the average Backdrop developer, but it could be something fun and exciting for everyone to work on. It's, you know, server building as opposed to module building or theme building, but it needs to get done, and it needs an owner. So if someone wants to grab that, we would really appreciate that. Other things we're working on, we've got our API site underway. I think it now is set to automatically pull code changes, so it should have latest and greatest Backdrop code on it at all times, which is wonderful. We've got change records going in. I know Luke created a ton of them. We've got other people reviewing and updating. We've got a plan for how our documentation is going to be handled over there. I think, you know, obviously the update or the API information is coming along a little slower than the code that it's describing, but I think that that's fair. Getting the code done first is how that goes. So hopefully we'll get that completed fairly soon in terms of documentation that's going to live on the API side and change records and stuff like that. So other things we've got going on, it would be great if we could create a GitHub service, so anyone who creates a Backdrop module or a Backdrop theme can register that, or a set of Backdrop layouts, can register those things as being projects for Backdrop. And then backdropcms.org, our primary website, can scour GitHub, find all of those projects that have self-identified as being specifically for Backdrop, pull them in, and then we can build a search interface so that if you wanted to be able to find a specific module for Backdrop, you can search our website rather than having to search GitHub, which can sometimes be confusing. You're not sure which project is the original project and which projects are forks. Having the canonical sources listed somewhere, easily accessible, easily searchable, is going to be really important for us. So we'll work on getting that set up shortly too. Setting up a GitHub service, again, this is something that is not usually in the standard library of tools that a Backdrop or Drupal developer might have. But if you want to see how GitHub works, creating a service looks like it's fairly straightforward. There's some really great documentation there, and we could use some help on that one as well. Then we've got some other stuff that is more in line with what Backdrop and Drupal people do. We've got a new design coming out for our Flagship website. The first iteration is just very simple. It includes our logo, and it's got some very small changes to fonts and button styles, and it's just in preparation for our kind of PR bit about, hey, you know, Backdrop is coming. We need to just kind of make a little bit more of a statement of like why you should care, why Backdrop's relevant. Things will make it important. We've also got an issue on GitHub where we're talking about the content that we want to use on that page. So if you are a marketing person or a business person and you're really good at selling things, us as developers are not super great at selling things. So we could use a little help with language on that page as well. We've already gotten some great feedback and made some iterations, but we get to get that nailed down as well. So Flagship website redoing coming soon. And if you want to help us, we work together every Thursday, so usually all day Thursday, but in particular after this meeting. If you can get a couple of hours a week from your employer, or if you just want to spend your lunchtime with us, we're usually around in IRC. If you want to ask us questions directly, our IRC channel is #Backdrop. You can tweet at us. You can tweet at Backdrop CMS. And we usually get all of those and respond to them fairly quickly. You can email us. You can find us, obviously, on this Google Hangout every week. If there's anything you don't know where to jump in, we've got a couple of good starting points. We've got a tag in the issue queue that's currently called Audience Novice, which is a great place for people who haven't contributed before to get started. There's a bunch of quick issues there where it's, oh, this is a small change or something that doesn't require a pull request, it just requires feedback. Or reviews of things, those are all in there. If you have a larger chunk of time, or you're used to contributing through GitHub and the pull request process, there's some bigger issues there too. You can filter by if there are bugs, if you want to help us fix some bugs, or anything that's particularly, if you're a designer and you want to contribute design, there's a tag there for issues that need design help also. So hopefully people will be able to find issues they're comfortable working on. If not, you can always ask us, what do you need help with, or this is what I'm good at, what should I work on? We can find you places to jump in also. We don't have any upcoming sprints planned, but we will work on that next year when we start working on our schedule and try and get some destinations where we can work on Backdrop together. And I think that's all I had this week in terms of updates. Nate, I know you've been plugging away on a bunch of stuff. Do you want to give us an update on anything that you've been working on lately?
Yeah, it's mostly just been keeping up with the pull requests that have been coming in. There's been a whole hell of a lot of activity. We've been having a lot more people install Backdrop and start reporting problems with it, which has been extremely helpful. A lot of it is actually not necessarily bugs, but I mean, getting familiar with some of the new workflows, like reinstalling or even installing for the first time, can be a little bit confusing to people because they're not used to having a files directory that is required, like the config files, at the same time as the database. So managing that right now has brought up some interesting problems and solutions that we could probably address, and we'll try to get done before 1.0.0. Yeah, views conversions, those have been going along great. So that's what I've been working on primarily. And let's see, there's some other things. Just getting marketing text put together for the website and for the mailer. That, I don't know, we're West Coast time. By the time that we get this thing, actually the release rolled, it might be a little bit late for a mailer, so we might mail it out tomorrow. Would be a good idea. But we'll probably still be tagging the release later today. That is the quote preview release, that is basically just, hey, we're highly stabilized and it's a good time to come and check us out. What we'll probably also start doing, I was pitching this to you, Jen, earlier, was we'll probably start looking at converting the Flagship site over to Backdrop CMS as well. I was looking at it earlier today. There's about 10 contributed modules on there. Link, Google Analytics, View, Slideshow, those sorts of things. But those would be really pretty simple to port over. Oh, has it? I think it was, it was this week. This week I published a video to YouTube that was how to port a module from 777 to Backdrop. And if you're watching this video, you're probably already on our YouTube channel. It's the video before this one. And that video is 25 minutes of how to port a module. And I do it all by hand during that 25 minutes and actually walk through the entire process of porting a module from 777 to Backdrop. And we also had our first contributor jump in and port a module and put it in the Backdrop contrib group as well. BW Panda ported his Simplify module from 777 to Backdrop 1.0 and put it into the Backdrop contrib group. Things are still a little bit ambiguous around contrib, so apologies there, but the plan for contrib, it's documented a little bit on the Flagship site, but there's a group on GitHub called Backdrop-contrib, and there's 3 modules in there right now: Devel, External Links, which is the video module that I use for demonstration purposes, and the BW Panda Simplify. But as we port the Flagship site, we'll probably port a dozen more modules over. They take, at least simple ones take 20, 30 minutes. So I mean, that's still a pretty big investment to, probably a couple days or even weeks potentially to do those initial portings of a dozen modules, but the process so far has really proven itself in the viability of how easy and quickly it is to port modules over from Drupal 7. So I'm really pleased with the result overall.
We also got a request to do a video of porting a theme from a Drupal 7 theme to a Backdrop theme, and that might be a really good place to use Backdrop CMS.org's public theme that we're using right now, port it to Backdrop, and then also include the changes that we got. We just got some new design changes this week for our kind of press release stuff. Maybe we could do that in another video and show that process.
Yeah, that process is going to be really interesting. It's still highly compatible between Drupal 7 and Backdrop, but there's some caveats because things like layouts themes are no longer responsible for layouts. So moving stuff, like you need to basically take your page template and move it into a layout template. And that's going to be a tricky process, although once you get familiar with it, it won't be too much more difficult than porting a module or anything else. So yeah, I agree. That would be a great thing. And yeah, hopefully we'll get to that soon.
Okay. I think that sounds great. I think in the process of porting Backdrop CMS.org to Backdrop, there's a couple of things we should do. We should make a video. We should make a blog post. I think if we can make a video of the theme transition, that would be really good. I also think some of the modules that we're using, things like Link, those shouldn't be ported. Those should just be moved into core. And I've created a couple of issues today for stuff like that, these are modules that were moved into core in Drupal 8. We had this meta of all of the issues that modules that moved into core in 8 compared to what we're doing with them in Backdrop. I updated that issue today to show the things that we're definitely not planning on updating in Backdrop and the things that have been postponed to later versions of Backdrop. And I think things like link module, like as we come across needing them, it might be good to just write that pull request that says this puts it in core, and then come up with a workable process for including the equivalent of a patched version of core, right? Like there's a workflow we have in Drupal where when you fix something in Drupal, you apply the patch and you maintain that patched version yourself. We're going to need that same process in Backdrop land, working from a pull request instead of a patch, or maybe starting from a pull request, making a patch, and then keeping a patch version of the software. So solving that problem, I think, would also publicly, so other people can see how that works, especially now when there are likely to be a bunch of pull requests in the queue that people want on their own site, I think would be a really good, valuable resource as well.
Yeah, this is slightly more elaborate, though, because normally a patch is something that fixes a bug. When you have a patch version of core, not adding an entire module. That could be.
But in this case, it's not going to be adding a module. It's going to be adding a field type, right? So
it's pretty much the entire contents of a module.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll think about that. I mean, at least on our roadmap, like the link types, we have them scheduled for 1.2. Scheduled, is pretty
Where's the
loose.
roadmap? I was looking for that earlier today and couldn't find it.
It's backdropcms.org/roadmap.
Haha.
That's funny.
Okay. So how does that then work? Are we going to create a contrib version of Link for 1.1?
Probably. So it probably would make sense, to have it in contrib, finalize it, and then move it into core.
Okay, but that would mean it would have to stay a separate module.
Which, might not be a bad approach for starters. Considering all of our other modules are already separate modules.
None of our other field modules are separate.
They're all inside of the field module directory. So text and... But
you don't have to turn on text module, do you?
No, it's a hidden required module.
Okay, so we could do that same thing. The thing I want to avoid is having a cluttered module page interface for things like Link. There's no reason for that to be a separate checkbox. But we can do the same process we've done for other ones. We can definitely follow. Okay, sounds like a plan. Sorry, we had to talk through that on the video. Sorry, everyone watching. Figured it out. All right. Well, I'm super excited about actually using this thing. So,
Yeah, it's really exciting. So look forward to it, or look out for it later today. The preview release, we'll try to put that up on the front page of backdropcms.org. And then tomorrow we're going to be sending out a mailer. If you're not subscribed to the mailing list already, sign up. It's at the bottom of the homepage of backdropcms.org. And if you are subscribed, look for the email tomorrow.
yay.
Okay, thanks everybody for watching. Thank you, Jen, again for moderating.
Sure. Happy Backdrop Day, everyone.
All right, thanks everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.